I never thought I'd see my parents' faces again, not after the way things ended between us. But when the lawyer's office called, saying my father had passed and the family will was to be read, I knew I had to go. It wasn't about the money. At least, that's what I told myself. Maybe it was closure I wanted. Maybe it was a chance to understand why love in our family always came with conditions, silence, or shame. The morning was gray when I arrived. The rain hadn't started yet, but the sky was the color of steel, heavy, watchful, like it knew what was coming. The law office sat on a corner of Main and Whitmore, a tall, red brick building with frosted glass windows and gold lettering that read Hartman and Lowe, Attorneys at Law. I remember standing outside for a long moment before going in, my reflection staring back from the glass, hair pulled too tight, eyes too tired, pretending to be fine. Inside, everything smelled of polish and money, mahogany furniture, leather-bound books, a faint trace of cigars, the kind of place where secrets went to be written in legal ink. Dana was already there. Of course she was. Perfect posture, legs crossed, white blazer, pearls. She looked like she belonged here, like this was her kingdom. She smiled when she saw me. But it wasn't kindness. It was that same smug curve of her lips that used to appear when she'd win and I'd lose at everything. Our mother sat beside her, hands clasped tightly in her lap. She looked smaller than I remembered, grayer, like a painting that had faded with time. Her eyes were red but dry. She'd cried long before today. The lawyer, Mr. Hartman, rose from behind his oak desk. He said, "Thank you for coming, Clara." His voice was formal, rehearsed. "Your father wanted this to be done with both of you present." I nodded, my throat tight. He gestured for me to sit, and the chair creaked slightly under me, loud in the silence. Dana leaned back, inspecting her manicure. She said, "This shouldn't take long. Dad always said I was the responsible one." That familiar burn rose in my chest. I didn't answer. I never did with her. Mr. Hartman adjusted his glasses and opened a thick, cream-colored envelope embossed with our family crest, an old, faded H surrounded by laurels. The paper rustled softly, the sound too loud for such a small room. "To my wife, Margaret," he began, "I leave the family estate, our home, and all its contents." He paused, looked at my mother briefly. She gave a faint nod, as though it was expected. "To my daughter, Dana, I leave $10 million and control over the family trust." My stomach tightened. I already knew where this was going. Mr. Hartman's eyes flicked to me before he read the next line. "To my other daughter, Clara." The pause stretched, long enough for Dana's grin to spread. Mr. Hartman, quietly, reluctantly, "I leave $1. The air left the room. For a second, I thought I hadn't heard right. $1? The words stumbled out of me, small and broken. Mr. Hartman cleared his throat. "That is what your father wrote. Yes." Dana let out a quiet, delighted laugh. "Well, at least he didn't forget you entirely." My mother's eyes dropped to the floor. She didn't speak, didn't even move, just folded her hands tighter in her lap. It wasn't about the money. It never was. It was what that $1 meant. A message, a punishment, a final rejection. I could almost hear my father's voice again, stern, disappointed. "You always question too much, Clara." All those years I spent trying to prove I was worthy, trying to build something on my own, and still, I was worth $1 to him. I stood slowly. The chair scraped the wooden floor, harsh, jarring. "That's fine," I said. "He made his choice. I turned to leave, but then, "Wait, Miss Clara, there's something else." I froze, halfway to the door. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a smaller, yellowed, edges-frayed envelope sealed with an old wax emblem. "This," he said, "was left by your grandfather. He gave it to me before he passed, with strict instructions that it be delivered only at the reading of your father's will." "Grandpa?" Dana frowned. "But he's been dead for years." "Yes," Mr. Hartman said quietly, "and yet he made sure this reached you, specifically you, Clara." He turned the envelope toward me. My name was written in my grandfather's elegant, slanted handwriting. I hadn't seen his writing in over a decade, but it still carried warmth. The way he used to sign the notes he'd slip into my school books, for curiosity, not for grades. My hands trembled as I took it. The paper felt rough, textured, fragile. Dana laughed. "Oh, please! Probably just another one of his riddles. Grandpa always liked his little games." I ignored her. Mr. Hartman's voice softened. "Would you like to open it here?" The question hung in the air. My mother shifted, eyes darting between us. For a long moment, I just stared at the envelope. I could almost smell it, the faint scent of cedar and old ink. Finally, I broke the wax seal. Inside, there was a single folded letter and an old brass key. The metal was cool and heavy in my palm, ornate, intricate, shaped like something from another century. I unfolded the letter carefully. The handwriting was the same, steady but shaky, ink faded with time. "My dearest Clara, if you are reading this, it means your father has followed the path I feared he would. He was blinded by pride, by pain, and by the mistakes of his youth. But the truth, my dear, is buried deeper than you think. There is a box in my old home, beneath the floorboards of the library. The key I have left will open it. What you find there belongs only to you, and it will explain everything he could not. Do not trust appearances, and above all, do not tell them what you found. Not yet. With love, always, Grandpa." I read it twice. 3 times. The words pressed against my chest like a heartbeat. "What is it?" Dana asked, craning her neck. "What's so special about it?" "Nothing," I said. "Just memories." Mr. Hartman looked at me, and in that single glance, I saw it. He knew something he wasn't saying. Dana exhaled dramatically. "Well, enjoy your dollar and your dusty old key." I turned to leave. But as I reached the door, I caught my mother's gaze. She wasn't looking at me, she was looking at the key. And for the first time in my life, I saw fear in her eyes. That's when I knew she already knew. I stepped outside. The air was thick with the smell of rain and something else, anticipation maybe. I stood on the sidewalk watching the clouds shift and roll above the courthouse towers. The key felt heavy in my hand, like it carried the weight of every unanswered question in our family. I thought about going home, pretending none of this mattered. But deep down, I already knew. I wouldn't. I couldn't. Because that letter, that single piece of paper, had already cracked something open inside me. I slipped the envelope into my coat pocket and began walking towards my car. As I opened the door, a drop of rain hit my hand, followed by another. Thunder rumbled in the distance. The storm was coming. And somewhere, miles away, under the creaking floorboards of a forgotten library, the truth was waiting for me. I didn't know it then, but that letter, that single moment in that office, would unravel everything I thought I knew about my family and about myself.
That night, I couldn't sleep. The letter lay on my nightstand, folded neatly beside the old brass key, glinting faintly in the dark like a watchful eye. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard my grandfather's voice whispering those words again. Do not trust appearances. What did that even mean? It wasn't the kind of warning you ignored. Not from him. He'd been a man of precision, of purpose. If he wrote those words, they meant something. The house was silent, the kind of silence that hums, alive with thoughts you can't turn off. By morning, I'd made up my mind. I packed a small bag, flashlight, gloves, notebook. The letter and key went in my coat pocket. As I turned the ignition, rain streaked the windshield and the city blurred behind me, glass, metal, and regret fading in the rearview mirror. The highway stretched out like a ribbon through mist and memory. I'd driven this road before, years ago, back when summers meant safety. Grandpa's house had always been a refuge. He taught me chess, patience, and that truth always reveals itself, even if people try to bury it. Curiosity is a compass, he used to say. Follow it, and you'll never be lost. Now, I clung to that compass like it was all I had left. The drive was long, 3 hours of winding roads and fog thick enough to swallow the world. The rain grew heavier as I neared the countryside, droplets streaking down like teardrops against the glass. The gate came into view, rusted, bent at hinges, the old iron scrollwork still spelling out Whitman Estate. When I stepped out, my shoes sank slightly into the damp earth. The gate creaked as I pushed it open, a brass letter opener, and slid it under the floorboard. Dusk billowed up. Beneath the plank lay a small iron box, blackened, heavy, its hinges corroded with age. My pulse quickened. The brass key fit perfectly. The box opened with a soft sigh. Inside, letters tied with ribbon, a leather-bound notebook, and old photographs. The smell of old ink filled the air, sharp and sweet. I picked up the top letter. It was addressed to Michael, my father. The handwriting was unmistakably my grandfather's, deliberate, elegant, steady, even in anger. Michael, if you are reading this, it means you have lost your way again. I warned you once that greed poisons even the purest love. If you choose to ignore this, then everything I have will pass to the one who remembers truth over power. Clara. My name? I froze. He'd written my name. The letter trembled in my hands. My grandfather had left everything to me? But the will. My father's will had given everything to Dana. So what had happened? I kept reading. I created a trust, one your wife never knew about, and one your pride will not allow you to mention. Its records are hidden, protected under my name and Clara's. If you destroy it, she will find the proof. I swallowed hard, my heart hammering. All these years, I thought I was the forgotten daughter, the disappointment. But maybe I was the only one he trusted. I opened the leather notebook next. Inside were records, detailed, dated, meticulous. But when I reached the gate, I froze. A black car was parked at the end of the drive. Its engine was running. For a moment, I thought it might be a neighbor. Then the window rolled down, and there she was. "Well," Dana said, "looks like I was right to follow you." "You followed me?" "Of course," she said lightly, stepping out, heels clicking against the wet stones. She smiled, tilting her head. "So, what did you find, little sister?" Her tone was sweet, but her eyes were knives. I clutched the bag tighter. "Nothing you'd understand." "Oh, I think I would. Dad told me something before he died, that there were things better left buried." She took a step closer, her reflection flickering in a puddle between us. "Guess we both like digging, huh?" For a long, charged moment, we just stared at each other. Two sisters, the golden one and the forgotten one, now standing on the ruins of everything our family built. Softly, controlled, Dana's words echoed in my mind long after she drove away. He said it was cursed. The words refused to leave me. They threaded through my thoughts like a melody I couldn't forget. That night, I didn't go home. I couldn't. The highway was slick with rain, the yellow lines blurring beneath my headlights. I drove aimlessly until the world narrowed to a single flickering motel sign on the side of the road. I checked in under my middle name, Jane. I didn't even know why. Maybe I was afraid that someone might come looking. The room smelled faintly of mildew and cigarette smoke, wallpaper peeling, a single lamp buzzing in the corner. I set the bag on the bed, emptied its contents. Letters, photographs, the notebook, the brass key, the tape recorder. They lay spread across the faded blanket like the pieces of a story told out of order. Each one held a secret, each one a truth someone had tried to bury. I picked up the photograph again, my mother, smiling, holding a baby that wasn't Dana, and the man beside her, the one who wasn't my father. He looked kind, almost shy, like he didn't know the photo was being taken. Something about the angle of his jaw, the sharpness of his eyes. It tugged at a memory I couldn't place. Then I remembered. In my grandfather's house, back when I was a child, there used to be a portrait hanging in the study. A tall man in a gray suit, painted in muted tones. My father had taken it down after Grandpa's funeral. When I'd asked him why, he'd said, "He's nobody worth remembering." That man's name was Henry Cole. I opened my laptop, typed the name into a search bar. For a long time, nothing but corporate articles appeared. Dry records of partnerships, business acquisitions, merger documents. Then a single headline stopped me cold. Tragic accident claims life of businessman Henry Cole, survived by wife Margaret and daughter Clara. I read it twice, 3 times. My mother had been his wife. Henry Cole was my real father. My pulse thundered in my ears, which meant the man who'd raised me, the one who left me $1, wasn't my father at all. Suddenly, everything made sense. The coldness, the resentment, the rejection. He had taken me in out of duty, maybe even guilt. He wanted to erase Henry Cole from our history, to pretend I was his child, his legacy. But deep down, he must have hated the reminder that I wasn't truly his. And my mother, she must have known. She had to. Maybe that's why she always seemed to live with one foot in the past, always looking out the window, always quiet when my father spoke. I went back to the notebook, my grandfather's. His handwriting was sharp, deliberate, like every word had been chosen with care. Michael's greed grows worse. He hides Clara's true identity to protect his own inheritance. If the truth comes out, everything changes. Everything changes. My throat tightened. All the years of distance, the single dollar in the will, the way Dana always seemed to know more than she said, it was all part of this. My father's secret, my family's lie. I had to find proof. Proof of who I was. Proof that Grandpa's faith in me wasn't misplaced. By dawn, the motel felt suffocating. I packed the bag again and drove back to the old estate. The air was clearer now, the storm washed away, but the world still felt heavy, like something unseen watched from the trees. The gate creaked as I pushed it open. Grass brushed against my legs, damp and cold. The house looked softer in the morning light. Broken, yes, but familiar. When I stepped inside,
The smell of cedar and dust filled my lungs. It was like stepping back in time. I made my way upstairs. The same staircase that used to feel so tall when I was small. Every step echoed through the silence. Grandpa's study was exactly how I'd left it. The books, the faint scent of pipe tobacco, the thin layer of dust over his desk. I ran my fingers along the edge of the desk and paused. There, a small, locked drawer I hadn't noticed before. The brass key felt warm against my palm. When I turned it, the lock gave a small sigh, as if relieved to finally open. Inside was a small object wrapped in faded cloth. It was an old tape recorder, the kind with physical buttons and worn-out edges. I pressed play. Static crackles, the voice of an older man begins. Calm and tender. If you're hearing this, then you found what I couldn't tell your father. Clara, my dear, you were never meant to be hidden. The truth was meant to free you, not destroy you. Take this to Hartman. He knows what to do. Hartman, the lawyer. The tape ended with a faint click. For a moment, I just sat there, holding the recorder against my chest. It was his voice. Real. Alive. Close enough to touch. I wiped my eyes and stood. Whatever this was, it wasn't just about inheritance anymore. It was about truth. And maybe about survival. Bags rustling, soft footsteps. I packed everything. The notebook, the letters, the photograph, the recorder, and zipped the bag shut. The moment I turned toward the door, a strange chill swept through the room. It wasn't the wind. It felt intentional. Like the house itself was warning me. I froze. Somewhere downstairs, a floorboard creaked. I waited, listening. Nothing. Just silence. I shook it off, gripping the bag tighter. Don't be paranoid, Clara. You're just tired. I walked down the hallway. Light spilled from the window at the end, painting the floor in long stripes. Dust floated through the air like falling snow. At the top of the stairs, I glanced back one last time. Grandpa's house had always been my refuge. Now, it was my graveyard of memories. When I stepped outside, the morning had turned gray again. Fog drifted low across the fields, swallowing the gate in mist. And then I saw it. Dana's car. The same black sedan that had followed me before. It was parked by the gate, engine silent, doors closed. For a second, I thought she'd come back. But as I got closer, I noticed something off. The windshield wipers were still running, slow, rhythmic, scraping against dry glass. Dana? No answer. The driver's seat was empty. The passenger side, too. Only there was something on the dashboard. A folded piece of paper. My name was written across it in neat, deliberate handwriting. Clara. I reached for it with trembling fingers. Inside was a single line. Some things should stay buried. The handwriting wasn't Dana's. It was too clean, too formal. Someone else had been here. I stepped back, scanning the fog, the trees, the long, empty road. Nothing moved. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I glanced at the seat again, a faint, dark stain near the handle. Red. Blood. Not much, but enough. Dana. I backed away from the car, clutching the note to my chest. Everything felt wrong now, too quiet, too still. The fog thickened as I hurried back to my own car. I didn't look back. I couldn't. Hours later, I was back on the highway. Every car behind me made my skin crawl. Every shadow on the road looked like a trap. But I had a name, Hartman, and I had my grandfather's words. Take this to Hartman. He knows what to do. By the time I reached the city, it was close to midnight. The building was tall, faceless, its glass windows reflecting the glow of streetlights. The night guard hesitated when I said my name, but when I mentioned Henry Cole, his expression changed. I need to see Mr. Hartman. It's about my
tense orchestral build-up, city traffic hum under low thunder. The city felt different that night, colder, heavier. Every building loomed like a silent witness. Streetlights flickered across puddles, and the air smelled of rain and exhaust. By the time I reached Mr. Hartman's office, my fingers were trembling on the steering wheel. I didn't even turn off the car right away. I just sat there, staring up at the glowing 9th floor window. Somewhere behind that glass waited the man who'd helped bury the truth. I took the old box from the passenger seat and held it for a long time. The brass latch felt cold, almost alive beneath my palm. It was time. The door opened, a bell chime. The lobby guard looked up, surprised. "Evening, miss. Office hours ended 2 hours ago." "I'm here for Mr. Hartman," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. He hesitated, then picked up the phone. A few murmured words later, he nodded. "Go on up. He said he'll see you." Elevator dings, soft hum as it ascends. Faint music plays. Each floor felt longer than the last. My reflection in the mirrored walls stared back at me. Tired eyes, pale skin, a stranger holding a box of ghosts. When the elevator stopped, I stepped into a hallway bathed in dim amber light. Hartman's nameplate glimmered at the end. I didn't knock. I just pushed the door open. The door creaked, clock ticking faintly. He was sitting behind his desk, reading a file. When he looked up and saw me, his face paled. "Clara," he said, standing quickly. I didn't expect. I cut him off by placing the box firmly on his desk. The sound echoed through the quiet room. "You knew about this, didn't you?" His mouth opened, then closed. He glanced toward the door like a man cornered. I was under instructions from your father," he said finally. "He made me promise never to tell." "You mean he blackmailed you?" "My grandfather trusted you." Hartman sank back into his chair. His shoulders slumped. "He did, and I failed him." He rubbed his temples. "Your father, he found out about the trust your grandfather created for you. It was meant to activate when you turned 21. But Michael, he used his influence to have it buried under shell companies, offshore accounts. I couldn't stop him. And you let him." He looked up at me then, tired, ashamed. "You think it was easy, Clara? Your father had power. He could ruin people. He ruined me, my firm, my family, everything. I thought if I stayed quiet, I could protect what little I had left." And I opened the notebook to the page with the bank accounts, sliding it across the desk. "Can you still access these records?" Hartman adjusted his glasses, scanning the entries. His eyes widened. "These are original account codes, pre-merger. I haven't seen these in years." "Can you trace them?" I asked. He hesitated, then nodded slowly. "If I can prove that the trust was never legally transferred, then yes, it would all revert to you." "Then do it." Typing sounds begin, quick, nervous, phones dialing, faint rustle of paper. Hartman's fingers flew across the keyboard, sweat glistening on his forehead. He made call after call, using words I didn't understand. Legal codes, asset verification, dormant accounts. The tension in the room was electric. And then I saw something. Out of the corner of my eye, a shadow. A figure standing outside the glass door. At first, I thought it was just a reflection, but then the shape moved, deliberate, steady, watching. "Mr. Hartman," I said, my voice barely above a breath, "we're not alone." He looked up just as the door swung open. And there she was, Dana. She stood in the doorway, her white coat gleaming under the fluorescent light, a small smirk curling her lips. "Well," she said, crossing her arms, "looks like you finally got what you wanted." I froze. My pulse spiked. "You've been following me since the house?" "Of course," she replied smoothly. "Did you really think I'd let you take everything? You were never one of us, Clara. Dad said it himself. You were his mistake." Her words hit like shards of glass, but something inside me had already hardened. Maybe I wasn't one of you. Maybe that's why Grandpa trusted me, because I wasn't poisoned by all of this. Hartman rose nervously. "Ladies, please, stay out of this," Dana barked. She turned her glare back to me. "You think finding those papers changes anything? You can't fight what's already been written." "No," I said, reaching into my bag, "but he can." I pulled out the tape recorder, the old one from Grandpa's drawer, and set it gently on the desk. Dana frowned. "What's that?" Tick of button, tape whirs, static crackles. Then came the voice, gravelly, aged, unmistakable. "Michael hid the truth about Clara's birth. She is the rightful heir to the Cole estate, and any attempt to conceal this is fraud." The words hung in the air, like thunder. Dana's expression broke. Her face went pale. Her lips trembled. No, that's impossible." Hartman looked stunned, his hands frozen above the keyboard. This changes everything." He turned quickly, typing commands, saving the audio, encrypting the file. "If I can send this to the legal archives, it's permanent. It can't be deleted or contested." Dana's panic erupted. She lunged toward the desk, trying to grab the recorder. I caught her wrist mid-air. "It's over, Dana. Stop fighting ghosts." Her breath came in sharp bursts. For a moment, we just stared at each other. Two halves of a broken family, locked in silence. Then something in her face cracked. "You don't understand, Clara," she whispered. "He told me if the truth came out, we'd lose everything. Mom would lose everything." I loosened my grip. "Maybe," I said gently, "but at least it'll be the truth." Dana stumbled backward and collapsed into a chair. Her eyes glistened with tears, her breath shaky. For the first time, she didn't look like my rival. She looked like my sister, small, lost, afraid. Hartman leaned back, wiping his face. "It will take time," he said quietly, "but I'll make sure justice is done. The Cole estate will revert to its rightful line." "Thank you," I said. Silence settled between us, fragile but real. Dana stared at our hands. "I didn't mean for it to go this far. Dad told me you were dangerous, that Grandpa left you that letter because you'd ruin us." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Is that what you believed?" Her eyes lifted, uncertain, wet. "I wanted to. It was easier than admitting he was lying." I nodded. For years, I'd imagined this moment as a victory. The truth revealed, the villains defeated. But standing there, I just felt tired. The fight had cost too much. Dana wiped her tears and gave a weak smile. "What happens now?" I glanced at the box on the desk. We let the truth breathe, and then we start over, whatever that means. Hartman stands, walks to the window. Outside, the city lights shimmered through the rain. Hartman turned to me, his voice calm but firm. "You need to be careful, Clara. When this comes out, people will come after you. The Cole fortune wasn't just money, it was control. I'm not afraid anymore. I've spent my whole life running from lies. I'm done." He nodded slowly. "Then your grandfather would be proud." That one sentence hit me harder than anything else. "Thank you," I whispered. Transition. Footsteps echo in the hallway. As I reached the door, Dana's voice stopped me. "Clara, I'm sorry." I turned back. She was standing, arms wrapped around herself like a child. Her voice cracked. "For everything. For believing him. For not seeing you for who you really were." I gave a small nod. "So am I." We stood there for a moment, no hatred, no shouting, just two sisters caught between the wreckage of truth and blood. Then I stepped out into the hall. Music shifts. Hopeful strings mingled with rain sounds. The elevator doors closed, and for the first time in years, I felt lighter. Not happy, not free, but just real. Down in the lobby, the guard gave me a cautious smile. Late night? I smiled faintly. Long story. As I stepped outside, the rain had started again. Soft, steady, cleansing. The city hummed around me, alive and indifferent. The truth was out there now, sealed.
It took months. Long, heavy, painful months. The legal battle that followed was relentless, a storm in slow motion. Courtrooms, interviews, headlines, family whispers, every document, every signature, every lie buried in decades of silence came crawling into the light. And the truth was heavier than I'd imagined. At first, I thought I'd feel vindicated, proud even, when the court confirmed what I'd already known, that I, Clara Cole, was the rightful heir. That everything my father built had been built on deception. But instead, I just felt tired. Utterly, quietly, humanly tired. Because no verdict can rewrite a childhood. No judgment can return the years spent trying to earn love that was never meant for you. The newspapers had their field day. The hidden heir, daughter of deception. The Cole legacy exposed. They printed my face beside my grandfather's, comparing the tilt of our chins, the coldness of our eyes, the same faint smile. But behind those glossy headlines, I wasn't the mysterious heiress they wrote about. I was just a woman trying to understand the ruins of my family. Hartman stayed by my side through it all. He fought with a quiet, steadfast integrity, maybe to redeem himself for the silence he once kept. In every hearing, every cross-examination, his voice never wavered. He didn't do it for money or reputation. He did it for him, my grandfather, and maybe, in a way, for me too. When the final ruling came, it was both an ending and a beginning. The estate, the business shares, the trust, all reverted to my name. A fortune, yes, but one that felt more like an inheritance of pain than privilege. I didn't celebrate. I didn't call anyone. I just sat on my balcony that night, watching the city lights blink like faraway fires, and let the silence breathe. Dana stopped calling after the first hearing. I didn't blame her. She had grown up believing the same lie I had, that loyalty meant silence and silence meant survival. One morning, a letter came from her. No return address, just my name written in her small, deliberate handwriting. "Clara, I don't know how to face you yet. Everything we were told was built on fear. I don't hate you. I envy your courage. Maybe one day, when the dust settles, we can meet again as sisters. D." I read that letter so many times, the ink began to fade under my fingers. Maybe forgiveness wasn't about words. Maybe it was just about not closing the door. Months later, when the lawyers were done, the accounts settled, and the media had moved on to someone else's tragedy, I drove back to my grandfather's house. Not as a stranger, not as an intruder, but as its owner. The air was different that day, warmer. The house didn't creak with ghosts anymore, it hummed, quietly alive. Sunlight streamed through the wide windows, catching the floating dust motes in its golden glow. It looked just as I remembered. The chessboard still open on the side table, the armchair where he used to sit with his pipe, the faint smell of cedar and old books. I walked slowly, touching the furniture, tracing the walls. Every step was a memory. Some sweet, some bitter, all real. In the study, the desk stood exactly as before. The rotary phone, the leather chair, the drawer where I had found the recorder. It felt smaller now somehow, as if the house had exhaled the weight it had carried for so long. I sat in his armchair and pulled out the notebook one last time. The brass key still hung from my neck, its edges worn smooth from the hours I held it tight. There, at the very end, one page I hadn't turned before. Faint handwriting, my grandfather's final words. If Clara finds this, tell her that love is not measured by inheritance, but by courage. The courage to face what others bury. The truth will hurt, but it will also heal. My throat tightened. A single tear slid down my cheek, landing on the page. For a long moment, I couldn't breathe. Because it wasn't just a message, it was his goodbye. And his forgiveness. I closed the notebook carefully, pressing it to my chest. Outside, the wind rustled through the trees, whispering against the windows like an old lullaby. The crow that used to perch on the fence was gone now, replaced by a dove. It made me smile. For years, this place had been haunted by secrets. Now it simply was. A house again. A memory that could finally rest. I packed up the documents, not to lock them away, but to preserve them properly. The truth deserved to be remembered, not hidden. As I wandered through the garden, I found the stone bench where my grandfather and I once sat when I was little, counting clouds and pretending they were ships sailing to faraway places. The air smelled of rain and earth. For the first time in forever, I felt safe. No ghosts, no guilt, no lies. Just peace. That night, I stood on the porch and watched the sunset melt into gold. The sky over the city glowed like embers. I could see the city line in the distance, the world that had once seemed so far out of reach. And I realized I didn't have to run from it anymore. I locked the door gently behind me, not to shut it away, but to mark the end of a chapter. The brass key glinted in the light one last time. Then I slipped it in my pocket, where it belonged, close, but no longer heavy. The next morning, I went to the sea. It was the same shoreline my mother once took me to when I was little, back when the world was simple and everything smelled like salt and hope. The tide rolled in, whispering against the rocks. I sat on the sand, opened the notebook again, and read every line until the pages blurred. Then, for the first time, I said it out loud, to the wind, to the waves, to the memory of him. Thank you, Grandpa, for telling me the truth, even when it hurt, for teaching me that freedom isn't inherited, it's chosen. Weeks later, I sold most of the family assets. I didn't need the mansion or the luxury or the name. I kept the house, the notebook, and the key. That was enough. With the rest, I opened a small foundation in my grandfather's name, the Cole Trust for Truth and Youth. It would fund scholarships for kids who grew up in silence,
Kids who deserved a chance to rewrite their own stories. Maybe that was how healing began, not with forgetting, but with giving meaning to the pain. One evening, months later, I got an email. No subject line, just a photo. It was Dana. She was standing in front of a small bookstore, smiling faintly. In her hands was one of the foundation's flyers. At the bottom, she had written in pen, "Maybe this is our way of starting over. D." I didn't reply right away. I just smiled. Because sometimes, silence can finally mean peace. The seasons changed, the garden bloomed again, and every time I passed by the mirror, I caught glimpses of both of them. My mother's kindness, my grandfather's strength. And for once, I didn't see pain in the reflection. I saw continuity. For the first time in my life, I wasn't someone's mistake. I wasn't someone's burden or secret or afterthought. I was me. Clara Cole. My grandfather's granddaughter. My father's lesson. And my own person.
If Clara's story of truth, betrayal, and redemption touched you tonight, remember this. Sometimes the hardest inheritance we receive isn't money or property, it's the truth. And sometimes the bravest thing we can do is open a box, face what's inside, and choose to walk forward anyway. Clara didn't find fortune at the end of her journey. She found freedom. Freedom from lies. Freedom from silence. Freedom to finally call her name her own. And maybe that's what real healing looks like. If you were in Clara's place, if you discovered your whole life had been built on a lie, what would you have done? Would you have fought for the truth or walked away to protect your peace? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one, and I love hearing your reflections. They remind me why stories like this matter. If Clara's story connected with you tonight, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to Cozy Nook, where we share stories that bring clarity, courage, and quiet healing, one truth at a time. Wherever you are tonight, I hope you carry this reminder with you. The truth may hurt, but it will always, always set you free. Heart. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next story.